All over the world, people have come to realize that the progress of nations depend upon the ability of those nations to exploit new knowledge, new technologies.
Science is a habit of thinking. Scientists just happen to have a passion in doing science. They tend to be very focused. They tend to work on certain topics for extended periods. So they have staying power, maybe with something which distinguishes them from the ordinary person.
Technology has to interface with governance so that it can be used properly and appropriately and in a very timely manner.
So it's important that the young people in particular see that the society has a high regard for scientists, and so the academy is one way of highlighting the importance of those professions.
A group of UP professors were responsible for advocating the establishment of a National Academy of Science, which later on was transformed into a National Academy of Science and Technology.
We are created by Presidential Decree 1003-A in December 16, 1976. The main mandate of NAST is recognition. We are also given the mandate to give advice to the President and his cabinet. Another function of NAST is to link up with other academies of science, because NAST is not the only academy of science in the world.
The Order of the National Scientists, they are really the highest symbols of achievement in science, and they receive special recognition from the president. The 6 divisions would be you have the biological sciences, physical and mathematical sciences, agricultural sciences, medical, engineering, and the social sciences. They have a very select group. Right now there are 15 national scientists who are living.
I know Dr. Ramirez because he was my professor in genetics and in plant breeding. Her major contributions had been in the cytogenetics of agricultural crops. Later on, she moved into biochemical genetics.
The principles of genetics is one to all organisms, animals, plants, microorganisms, including us, including humans. My contribution is really, in effect, not directly for the use of the farmers. We sort of start it and then pass it on. What we produce, we move it to the plant breeders, and then the plant breeders are the one who sort of shape it up to whatever is the requirement in the field.
Dr. Helia Castillo is actually a rural sociologist. So she's been based in UP Los Baños, and her work is an example of what science does for the advancement of communities and development.
I looked at the social inequalities. I compared the statuses of the different regions and how everything was concentrated in Manila. The second book was an attempt to analyze farmers' reaction to the first new rice varieties, because there was a lot of controversy. And I found out how enthusiastic farmers were.
Dr. Giuliano has made significant contributions in the field of rice research, in particular rice chemistry, and has contributed significantly to the research on the rice quality of table rice.
Well, my work is on the chemical basis of grain quality. The perception of the consumer is that rice tends to result in diabetes, which is not the case. Ang mataas lang ang glycemic index, yung malagkit.
National scientist Claire Balthazar is recognized as one of the leading entomologists in the country. She did a seminal work in the description and classification of Philippine insects.
Nobody wanted to study small microscopic wasps that are beneficial. When the farmers spray, they should watch first what insects occur in their field. If there are more of destructive insects, then they go on to spray. But if there are a good number of beneficial insects, these will be the ones to control the pest.
Dr. Dan Pekin and his two students, by association, they observed that the varieties of maize have special susceptibility to a disease called southern leaf blight. And they found out that all of them had this kind of cytoplasm.
Nobody was looking after the other important crops like vegetables and legumes. Why legumes? Because legumes are the main source of nutrition. You don't get any protein, much protein from rice because you remove the bran. With legumes, you get protein from legumes.
Si Dr. Lola Cruz, her achievements were in the field of marine biology, leading the work on cone snails. And these have many important implications in medicine.
I've been working on toxins from marine snails that can kill people. What we did is to isolate the components of the venom, and in the process we discovered a number of neuropeptides. These compounds that we have isolated, some of these peptides, conopeptides, are being developed as models for the development of drugs. In fact, there's one of these peptides which is primary alternative to morphine.
Dr. Tabash was actually my professor when I was a veterinary student, and his field was public health. Dr. Tabash's work has been pioneering here. For example, he's a very firm advocate of rabies control.
My main research is on leptospirosis. Some cases that they could not diagnose at first. Ang tawag nga nila nung una yung mga fever, joint pain, sakala nila flu. Eh, hindi pala, kaya nilalagay nila, hindi nila alam. FUO, fever of unknown origin. Later on, it was leptospirosis.
Nestor Domingo is an internist. His claim to fame is his leadership in the liver disease group in the Philippines.
My work involves three major areas. One is a parasitic disease. The other is liver cancer, hepatocellular carcinoma. And the third work is related to liver cancer, and that is viral hepatitis B. Most pestering problem in medicine is not due to lack of appropriate intervention. It's because of the social determinants of health. That the poor are disadvantaged, they are less healthy simply because of their living condition, lack of nutrition, lack of access to medical care. This clinical epidemiology is supposed to bridge the gap so that clinicians, people like me, who are trained to see patients, will get involved in public health issue.
Si National Scientist Mercedes Concepcion, siya ay isang trailblazer sa larangan ng population studies. Marami sa mga policies ng gobyerno ay nakabase sa population studies.
It is the towards establishing a population policy and a program of family planning. The reproductive health encompasses all of these sectors, both employment, labor force, family planning, education, and so forth, especially education of the young. If they see that population problems are critical, then they will appreciate and make efforts to do something and engage in research.
Dr. Rosabella is one of the 7 members of the Social Science Division. His work in economics is acknowledged here and internationally. He has given many new insights into what is almost mysterious.
Correctness of a policy does not depend alone on technology. Depends on the culture of the community. If you adopt a policy that is good, sane, and reasonable, but in a different culture, and you apply the same policy to a community of a different culture, you can have dislocations, you can have dissonance, tremendous dissonance, which is why many discourse now on policy predicated on understanding of society, and therefore social disciplines are important.
If you're part of the almost all mathematicians in the country know who Father Bienvenido Nebres is. People sometimes forget that he did very important work in pure mathematics, but really Father Nebres is known more for his influence on education reform.
When you really begin to ask yourself, how does my research or how does science contribute to social progress in the Philippines, for example, overcoming poverty, you begin to realize that you cannot separate research science from the overall problems of the country. We found that some of the kids that they said were non-readers or bobo, actually they could not see the blackboard. They did not realize they needed eyeglasses. So nakikita mo na if you really want to contribute to national progress, you have to move beyond just the strict scientific research, and you have to work with other groups that are really solving the other areas that you need precisely to develop science in the young people. So I work with Kawat Kalinga and the poverty problem. I work with an organization called Sinergia Foundation in order to work with the public schools in the Muslim areas. The challenge to our youth, what can you do so that we will have a better country?
First thing you have to remember about Dr. Alcala is really he stayed in Silliman University in Dumaguete for the longest time and really built up the marine biology program. He's a herpetologist, and that's where he made his mark. And eventually, Dr. Alcala has been involved in various biological activities, particularly conservation, marine conservation.
We are a country with a tremendous biodiversity, and this biodiversity has many uses. Amphibians, for example, can be indicators of climate change. My work was involved new ways of looking at our biodiversity. The marine protected areas, for example, has increased the fish catch of people, fishermen, fishing in coastal areas. Not only that, the coral reefs that are protected are very beautiful, and fish, and there are sources of fish for food, for export, and people are attracted to the coastal areas that have been developed into marine protected areas.
Dr. Oman Barba's work is quite well known because he has been working on mangoes, which has made significant contributions to the way we produce that kind of fruit in the Philippines. Instead of just one breeding season, he can produce mangoes 4 times a year.
I started with fruit crops. I went into tissue culture in graduate school, but I was interested in both. So when I started working at the UPLB after graduation from university and graduate school, I did both. But that mango flowering was a special interest that I carried, and I still continue because of interest in it. I think the biggest inspiration is the complementary, yung mga comments ng mga boss ko na rinirespeto ko, and they tell you na maganda yung ginawa mo. Parang yun ang napaka-importante sa akin, na the product of all this effort.
Ang Pilipinas ngayon ay isang major exporter ng seaweed. So napaka-importante yung contribution ni Dr. Trono sa pag-establish ng seaweed research dito sa Pilipinas.
When you choose a field of study, you must choose that field where very little work has been done so that you can contribute a significant amount of information on your research. I always believe that the work of a research scientist must not only stop in the production of information about a certain problem or issue. I always advise young students when he asked me, how is it possible for you to stay working in the same area of research for 47 years? I said, well, I enjoy what I'm doing. Very simple.
Dr. Ed Gomez is really known for his studying things like giant clams. He was responsible for breeding and conserving these giant clams, which otherwise would have gone extinct by this time.
I'd like to mention a third area where I have made some contributions, and this has to do with institution building. I don't know how it happened, but I was offered the job to start the Marine Sciences Center, a research center of the UP. So the Marine Sciences Center transformed into the Marine Science Institute in 1986. It has become the most scientifically productive unit or department in the University of the Philippines, and I would like to say in the country, because I was fortunate in having been able to recruit talented young people who were well motivated and who worked harmoniously.
It was in the early 80s when Dr. Fidel Mundo, the pediatrician, was elected national scientist.
It was in 1980 when the National Academy of Science and Technology first recognized 10 outstanding young scientists, and by 1982 it became a regular program of the National Academy.
NAST already have the Outstanding Young Scientist Awards, and as years goes by, there are many awards that had been added on. We also have the Philippine Talent Search for Young Scientists.
The Philippine Science Heritage Center is an initiative of the National Academy of Science and Technology to bring science and technology to the level of school children and the youth, because they need to appreciate what Filipino scientists have done in spite of many constraints, and in spite of our condition as a developing nation. We have a lot of things to be proud of. It's really been very difficult to say that we've always been moving as an academy in the name of the academy, because many of the academicians are really engaged in many capacities in different government committees, in different universities, in different fields of endeavor of science.
Science and humanities should never be detached from each other, because science can be very powerful, but it can also be very harmful. And in order for science to work for us, it's important to have that human dimension in order that science be to our advantage. Else, if we don't use the humanities, if there's no social dimension, there's no human dimension to our science, then it might be harmful.
People always say that science and technology is the key to progress. Part of that is true, but this is a very complex issue, and one must get the best views from different approaches. Science and technology, it will give you a lot of core ideas, foundational ideas that one can use to look for solutions. But one must also look for insights from the social scientists and from even artists, because problems cannot be solved using only one approach.
The biggest change, of course, is the way the media landscape has changed. Internet was not there in 1976. And the Academy is responding, as scientists should, to the new challenges of this media landscape of being able to reach people, not just through old but new media as well. This is a real challenge, learning to communicate through social media and through internet. But we know that we have to start doing this to be able to affect policies and practices.